Hi, everyone. This is Paul Casey, the Kempo Karate Hall of Fame educational video series, where we discuss Kempo principles, concepts. Sometimes we discuss techniques, forms, history, and we are very honored on a rare occasion to have special guests. Today, I'm very lucky to have a good friend. I really admire this man. His name is Jamie Seabrook, and he and I are going to discuss a second part of a discussion regarding vertical and horizontal attacks and responses. So with no further ado, let's invite Jamie to be a part of this. Jamie, hello, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me on the show again, Paul.
Well, thank you. You know, I bring you some fun stuff. We talked about our favorite movies. We're like kids, like revert back. Oh my gosh, let's go back and it's like looking at a comic book or something. And but your recognition and people think a world of you, and it's nice to have the up and coming future seniors of our martial arts to talk. And so today I am asking you to follow up and give your input. But before we go any further, Jamie, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about you and your background?
Sure. So I'm from London, Ontario, Canada. I've been training in Kempo Karate for just a little over 37 years now. I received my 8th degree black belt in 2020 under Grandmaster Larry Tatum. I've also cross-trained in a couple other arts. I received my black belt under the late Grandmaster Remy Priestess in modern Arnis, and Black Dragon Kung Fu under Master Paul Chow. And Kempo is always my base art. I always do Kempo. 95% of my practice is Kempo related. For the last 10 and a half years, starting in January 2012, I started training something different outside of the scope of the stand-up striking arts. I started training in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu under Henner and Hilon Gracie from California, and I've been doing that now for 10 and a half years. And I think the reason why I wanted to kind of expand my martial arts, if you would, is one, I love martial arts, and two, I felt that there's only so many ways to hit someone from a striking standpoint standing up. So to add another striking art, I didn't really feel like that would be really advantageous, because I feel like Kempo is probably the most complete system in the world. I feel like its striking is outstanding, but I felt like being a smaller guy, I'm 5'6". I felt like if I was ever in a situation where a bigger, stronger, heavier person were able to take me to the ground, and I wasn't able to end the fight from the stand-up position, what type of knowledge base do I have? And I think it's really easy to say, well, I'll just use my Kempo on the ground, but a counter argument would certainly be, if my Kempo, or anyone's Kempo for that matter, didn't work from a stand-up perspective where they're highly trained, what type of knowledge base would we be dealing with on the ground? So I feel like the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu was not something separate and unique. It's just something I brought home to Kempo to help me understand Kempo more.
Okay, now you do understand that Parker's American Kempo, as you said, is one of the most sophisticated systems, if not the most sophisticated system in the martial arts. And I mean, there's been volumes of written on, people discuss this. So I'm not going to go down that path. But he would always propose the idea that there is unlimitless knowledge to be acquired. Now, Mr. Parker came from a judo background. And I had this discussion with founding master Todd Durgan recently, black belt in that. Then he incorporated boxing through his father, and they studied with Professor Chow. Kempo was not a sport. It was never intended as a sport. It was intended as a self-defense to easily deal with a situation and then get out of it as quickly as possible. And Parker also thought of multiple combatants, okay? So I just want to share that with you so that we don't have that issue. Mr. Parker his background, as you know, came from judo, and they also incorporate boxing through his father, boxing commissioner in Hawaii, and then he studied with Professor Chow. And Kempo was never intended as a sport. Okay, it did incorporate a lot of jujitsu principles. Okay, along with striking attitudes. Groundwork was something Parker was familiar with. However, he did not want to be on the ground because that limits you to a one-on-one situation. All right. The only other person you had to worry about was the ground. And that was sort of the unknown factor in the equation. Now, you bringing up the jujitsu aspect of it, which was formulated for sport. At least it elevated, it grew into that. That's the aspect that you're studying right now. So the purpose of my of bringing that up is that we can deal with it. Now, I have no problems discussing and going further with education. And I'm going to use a quote from the Zen of Kempo with Ed Parker. I always try to use a reference to Mr. Parker or some legitimate source so that we have foundation. It's just not Paul Casey saying it or Jamie Seabrook saying it. It's the founder. So he says it here. He says when it comes down to learning is that the true measure of humility is when you remain what you are, regardless of the success that you have become. He said one becomes great when he comes to the realization that what he knows is very little. Ed Parker, founder of Kempo Karate. So let's talk about this. My biggest problem with anything on the ground is, like I said, that's an unknown factor in the equation. We have many techniques and concepts and principles to deal with multiple attacks. We have, as a teaching tool, we have the great universal pattern, which hangs up behind me, which teaches you the different angles and concepts of what happens in our martial arts. Behind me, I use the ball. Here, there's a 3D version of the darn thing right there. The strikes and ab. And this was created, by the way, by Todd Durgan. If you want, you can always get one of those from him. Okay, now let's get to it. There are several people that can incorporate a standing, I call it the vertical position versus the horizontal position. And Mr. Parker always used to say, he who hesitates meditates in this horizontal position. So we don't want to do that. All right. You're going to help us to understand how do we do the transitions from a vertical position to the horizontal. I have my opinions on that from Senior Master Arts Frank Trejo. He used to use the takedowns. Everything was a takedown with him. 5 swords and then boom, down you went. You know, dance of death. We got boom, we're down on the ground. You have these different results, and that comes from people like Steve LeBounty and Tom Kelly, and now in tournament fighting, and when we're not allowed to do sweeps. Okay, so sweep the leg, Johnny, is not a new concept. So now I say, Jamie, help the viewers and me understand what you listen to and your opinions on vertical to horizontal, the transitions, and why it's important to understand that.
Yeah, so a couple of things I would say. One, even to go back to the Ed Parker quote that you had, which I thought was awesome. I would take that quote and say, okay, if I'm saying this from a humble perspective, the more knowledge you acquire, the more humble you should be. Then I had to look myself and say, my knowledge of fighting on the ground is extremely limited. And again, I understand the counter argument of, well, Kempo encompasses it all, but we don't really learn what to do against a bigger, stronger, heavier opponent if they take you to the ground. Now, I'm an advocate. This is how I teach. I speak to the masses. So Ed Parker, there's only one Ed Parker, just like there's only one Bruce Lee, right? So we take some of these people and we go, look at what they were able to achieve. And all of that is, I mean, Ed Parker was decades ahead of his time, but I speak to the masses. And when I speak to, say, people of different size or shape, so a bigger, stronger, heavier male attacking a much lighter female, could she pull off 5 swords and end the fight? Perhaps. But I also feel that a lot of the striking arts in general, it is very possible for a bigger, stronger, heavier person to take the person to the ground. And once you're on your back and you have someone hovering over you, Sure, you can poke the eyes and you can grab the groin. I get it. You can hit to the throat. All those things, in my opinion, might work, but it better end the fight, because if it doesn't, it's going to aggravate the situation and it's going to get worse. So one of the things that I truly believe can benefit Kempoists, this is my opinion, is that Gracie Jiu-Jitsu is based on energy efficiency. So it's based on timing and leverage, and not based on physical attributes like how strong you are, or me holding a pad up and saying, let's see who can hit it the hardest, because there is an advantage to size and strength. And I think that, you know, from say like a smaller person perspective, that a lot of the striking arts that advocate for finishing the fight by, you know, chopping the neck or hitting the eyes, you better end the fight, because that can aggravate the situation. Take any technique, let's say crossing talon, gripping talon. I love them all, Paul. But if we take it from the perspective, who's most likely to be grabbing who from a wrist grab? This is my opinion, and it's only my opinion. I would argue that it's more likely to be a bigger, stronger, heavier person that grabs and says, hey, come over here, come into my car, whatever it might be. So you can say, yeah, I can poke them in the eyes for sure. Better end the fight, because they can hit you back. Or you can de-escalate and move away. And, you know, yes, the person might attack you again, but at least you've calmed the situation than aggregating the fight. And the other thing I would say, Paul, is that I think a lot of Kempoists, and not just Kempoists, martial artists who've never trained BJJ, they put BJJ under one umbrella. It's like when I say, hey, you know, have you ever done martial arts? Yeah, I have. Great. What style of martial arts have you done? Karate. Oh, what type of karate? Just karate. Well, no, there's so many different styles of karate. And I think one of the problems is, and I think, to be honest, Kempoists can be guilty of it, we paint a broad picture of sport with BJJ. Gracie Jiu-Jitsu is 100% street self-defense. In fact, a lot of people don't realize this, that all of the techniques that Gracie Jiu-Jitsu we have in BJJ, but it's not vice versa. Because BJJ in general, there is a large focus on sport, playing in the guard, triangle choke, a lot of stuff that, you know, you and Todd had spoken about. But in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, this is how I was taught. If the word punch doesn't come up in a class, run for the door, because the focus is on sport. In reality, I'm not going to hold someone in the garden, you know, let's cross choke and be not aware of the punches. Those punches are going to rain down. They're going to take your head off. So there's always focus on punch protection. In fact, one of the white belt moves that we learn is called punch block series. That's the name of it, where we're constantly trying to be aware of the punches that can be coming down from different ranges. So for me, the self-defense, which is the pure only part of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, helped me understand Kempo, that even if we're in a tighter range, like we talk about in Kempo, outer range, within range, penetration control, manipulation control goes by different, but what about when you're skin tight control? What happens when someone's hovering on you and you can't breathe? What are you going to do? Most will panic if they don't have any training. They'll, you know, start to hit the ribs, but from that angle, we call that like not a level one punch, because there's not a lot behind it. The person's on you. What are you going to do to control the situation? So I feel like in terms of range, this has really helped me when someone's skin tight and they're hovering over you, how to escape. And it just helps me understand the Kempo techniques even better.
There's an answer to that. Mr. Parker, I once said that was dealing with sparring with larger men. There were some big guys in Pasadena. Obviously, the best example would be Tom Kelly. But there were other people that, you know, Ken Johnson, 6'4", 290, 305, something like that. It's just massive human being. Sure. And I'm watching several of the younger black belts work against him and whatnot. And some of them are about your height. And I'm 6'1". So I'm looking at this guy, I'm thinking, I'm glad I can outrun him. And that's really the truth of it. Because Parker said, if you can leave, he told me that. He said, listen, Paul, you don't have to fight. You can leave. You can come back the next day and kick his ass because he thinks you're afraid of him, you psychologically. There's the 8 considerations, acceptance, environment, range, et cetera, position, maneuvers, such and such. He said to me, I said, so how do you defeat? He looked at me, he says, Paul, in his nice, Hawaiian accent. He said, big ship, little ship, doesn't matter. proper placement of the hold will sink them both. So when it used to be, when they would demolition derby come in, demolition team would come in and they would destroy a casino, take a big wrecking ball and then crash it and all that. Now they use precise detonation in certain areas systematically, about 5 or 6 spots. And then this huge casino doesn't go like that, because they don't want it to do that. Because then that means all that debris and dust and everything goes everywhere. They want it to go straight down, boom, and that's it. And it makes it nice and compact. So the proper placement of your strikes, and you know, again, if you go to the 8 considerations, that will help you. Now, you're telling me something that most people have not discussed, which is that in the Gracie system, they are approaching that of strikes. But I would say that in the Gracie system, we're now into a grappling controlled contact manipulation. We're in there. That's that umbrella that we're talking there. And how do you respond to that? The key is that if he's doing all this, and you've probably been there, do you allow when you're trained, do you allow somebody to actually whack somebody with an elbow or a strike to the rib cage and smash them? Do you do that? Probably not, because we're sort of in this, what we call compliant training session. That's why sometimes the pushback on us for Friday night lines when I was there was that the guy would stand there and throws the punch, lock the hold, and then the guy does 5 swords. Yeah, whatever. You know what I mean? Okay, I preferred what Frank would do, which was, he said, I'm not telling you, throw whatever you want. Come at me. All right, throw the kick, throw the punch, grab me, try to do whatever it is, and then see what happens. And that's true combat. However, we both know there are some rules. We have a padded floor. We have a dry environment. It's not wet or slick. We have people there to help. We also know that we're playing a little with fairness. I use that word loose. There's a few times people really do not use control very well. And that's it. So with you have to walk me through it, because I am going to speak on behalf of the viewer. I don't understand. I've never been in there. So tell me what happens when you're training against actual punches and strikes. Do you actually try to hit you with that or not?
Yeah, well, I'll say this, that unlike the big umbrella of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, for a technique to hold, there's 3 key components. 1, your technique has to be energy efficient, which basically is talking about leverage and timing. It's not based on physical attributes and how strong you are. 2, they have to be based on natural body movements, very similar to Kempo. And 3, there has to be a street applicability to the move. So, for example, in guard, no, we're not trying to punch the person's nose and break their nose or crack them in the teeth. We're doing it in a controlled environment. But to be honest, Paul, I feel like any martial art should be, when you train, sure, there's times you get hit and you get a, busted rib or whatever it might be, but we also have to go to work the next day, or we have to wake up in the morning. So there's always an element of control. But certainly in the guard, the focus, for example, is not sport. It's punches raining down, person's trying to choke you for all they've got, in your throat, how to escape these common attacks. So for example, and if I see a rape awareness seminar and I say, just poke the person in the eye, the person's holding you down, elbow them in the nose. I'll be honest, I don't feel like those are great techniques for being on the bottom. I feel like it's actually a worse technique, because
you're going from, I want to know the transition from vertical to horizontal.
Yeah,
you're skipping vertical, just going to the ground.
Okay, so here,
and the reason I bring that up to you, Jamie, is simple. Yeah. That's the big bitch that a lot of people have. They say, well, we're already on the ground. Well, you're already, okay, now we're in a compromising situation. I don't think you have to be an expert in how to get out of that, but you need to have awareness so that you can prevent that. And if you watch MMA right now, the UFC stuff, you're seeing that they used to go to the ground. Now they're not. They're standing back up, letting it get, because Why would I go into that element that you're an expert at and I'm
Yeah,
not?
I understand. So,
And then you get the ground and pound and you're in trouble.
yeah. Okay, so that's a great point. Yeah. So rather than going like this, like a little hug, and we're gonna hug each other, go right to the ground. I get it. So two key words that are really paramount in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu that I also use that phrase sometimes when I'm teaching Kempo is distance management. Call it what you want, range. But basically the idea is green light, red light, green light. And the idea is that you are safest from your opponent if you are 2 arm lengths away. Because at that range, you can see their leg move, you can see their hand move. So green light is I'm at a safe distance where the person's not going to hit me. So all fights start in a stand-up position, not on the ground. Completely agree. Person takes a step towards me. Okay, this is maybe a little bit different. I would do what we call in Kempo a step drag back, where I'd use my back foot first so that I continue to have my base. I don't get caught with my feet close together because if they shoot for the legs, I'm on my back. So we maintain that green light distance management perspective. Red light is when we're close enough in Kempo where we can get hit with either hand or possibly either knee or either foot. And then green light again is when we're skin tight. So distance management, we're 2 arm lengths away. Red light, you can hit me, I can hit you. Green light, we're skin tight. Now, I'm just going to say this. This is a kind of a interesting way of thinking. I would argue that, and not just the vast majority, all striking styles teach red light. Yet we all agree that red light is where we do most damage from striking. And, what I would say is, yeah, with more experience, you're going to win most confrontations if you're highly trained. But there's always that possibility that the other person, the bigger person, the person who caught you off guard, gets that one shot in and they end the fight. And if we even talk about things like, for example, and I know that there's still rules attached to it, but like UFC, if you were to go into the UFC as a Muay Thai kickboxer and that's all you knew, or a karate person, whatever it might be, and you have no experience on the ground, if you're in exchange with someone, or maybe you're getting the worst end of the bargain of the deal in a fight, your only hope, and I think everyone would agree, is to grit your teeth, hang in there, and try to land a good punch. Whereas someone who has experience also on the ground could go, this isn't working too good for me, I'm losing. Okay, I'm going to take them out of their game, shoot for their legs, and establish a new game where I can now strike them when they're on the bottom. But if you have no training in that whatsoever, the only thing you can do is hope for you to land that one big shot. And I'm not taking away from boxing or kickboxing, but ultimately what your goal is to knock the person out, because this is what you rely on. But you have so many more tools, I would argue, if you can also, okay, this fight isn't going as I want, so I'm going to shoot for the legs, get on top, control them. It's a completely different game. So I would argue that in jiu-jitsu, all fights, certainly from the Gracie perspective, start stand up. When we continue to keep that green distance. Hopefully we don't have to fight, Paul. If we can both go home without blood, hey, we both won. No one got hurt. You can call me all the names you want. Hey, I went home to my family and so did you. If they throw that punch, I don't want to spend too much time in the red zone unless I am able to land that good groin kick or that chop to the neck or shot to the eyes. I might just tie you right up and do a leg hook takedown, take you to the ground. And, I can, even from a police or military, like one of the things that this is my opinion that surprises me is people will say, jiu-jitsu is no good for police or military. I would argue the opposite. Because, if cameras are on you at all times today and you don't have a lot of training as a police officer, well, sure, you can punch them, you can elbow them, you can knee them, but you're going to be caught in camera. You're dealing with a lawsuit. But if you know how to tie them up, take them to the ground, handcuff, I feel like you have more weapons that you could use in a more in a way that could get the job done easier.
Well, when it comes to police officers, that is a different situation. We've gone to the point where there is, a striking, hitting, are things of the past because of liability. and we're trying to take away the weapons that they need. Now, first of all, police officers are a target. We know who they are. They're dressed appropriately. They have equipment on them. They have certain kinds of training. They don't know who they're going against. They know nothing about this alleged person they're having a interface with. But that person could be either a highly skilled fighter, or could just be a street thug, could be a despondent, adult, or could be somebody whacked out on something. You don't know. So they're constantly looking at it. And the key is that we don't want to hurt you unless you try to attack. That's why they do it in numbers, if they can help that. My brother was law enforcement for 34, 36 years, something then. And that's the last thing he wants to do. Sadly, he was involved in 2 shootings, which resulted in the death of the other individual. One was a guy had a knife to the victim. And he said, listen, I knew he was going to kill her. I could just say, because he had a history in the area of doing this to these people. So Chris sadly had to take him out. He didn't live well with that. The other one was engaged in a battle where, again, somebody was going to have a confrontation. This was down in the thick of it. You can understand, sometimes the racial elements can also escalate, a confrontation, because you're black, you're white, Hispanic, whatever, and you're in an element that's not your game. That's the one thing I think you're trying to point out. It put them play in your game, not theirs. Because if you're confronting, like, do you play golf?
I'm not a golfer.
Okay. Well, in golf, a lot of times you're playing against the other person. You say, oh, well, but really it's a game of mistakes. He who has the less amount of mistakes, his score is lower. Okay. It's the opposite of basketball, football, soccer, whatever. But you really never play against the opponent. You play against yourself and the course. And the course is laid out. There's 150 yards. There's some water in front. And there's this little white ball that sits on a tee. And it's not moving. I mean, like, hey, man, take a free shot, okay? I don't have to worry. The room's perfect. Lighting's good. Dry floor. You're standing there, and all I have to do is hit Century Bob right in the face. Should be able to do that. But most people get excited, and they lose control, and they can't hit with a damn. And the ball goes off the way, or over this way, or into the water. And the same thing is a situation where we're talking about. It's not fair to compare studio time in your training versus practical out in the field, real deal. And I would think that most of the people that you deal with in the Gracie system would prefer to stand up and walk away. But if confronted with that, you know what you're going to do as best as you can in that situation. In your case, though, you have the advantage because you have a history of striking as a high-ranking Kempoist. So you understand that there's a lot of weapons there. Mr. Parker called them his tools. So how do we deal with, like I said, I'm not trying to say one's better than the other. I just different elements, a different playing field. So how do you do the transition from the standing vertical to the horizontal? Or if you're in a horizontal, how do you get out of the horizontal to get the vertical so you can leave?
Yeah.
Because
a couple things I would say there. The first would be, you're absolutely right, Paul. Jiu-jitsu could really benefit from Kempo because the striking and stand-up, you want to be on your feet as much as possible. 100%, I agree. In American Kempo, we have 154 techniques. Some teach the extra 3, aggressive twin, spreading branch, intellectual departure. And then we have all the extensions, right? And one of the common things that's been brought up for many, many years is, we do our techniques and we're trying to perfect them and try them on different bodies, but then we spar and we don't look like the same person. It looks more like a kickboxing match in the sense that a lot of the techniques in Kempo are meant to take the person out, right? So, if someone tries to punch me, even though it's for a push, I'm not going to do glancing salute and break their arm when I spar, so our sparring kind of looks like a separate element sometimes than our sparring. Although I think we all recognize that sparring and techniques are both important. one of the cool things about Gracie Jiu-Jitsu or Jiu-Jitsu in general is every single technique in self-defense we can do we can practice when we are fighting, when we're what we call sparring or rolling. So every single move can actually be applied in a fight at any given time. And I like that, and I love the line drills, but this is my opinion. It's easy to look pretty good in line drills because you know the attack. The person's going to stand there and you're going to light them up doing 5 swords. It should look good, but it seems just a little choreographed, which is why even in Kempo, I think it's really important that we take our techniques, practice them diligently, but also spend time working on more spontaneity. Spontaneity is what I was trying to say. We're using our sparring. But in terms of bridging the two, this is my personal opinion. It's how I do it. I don't change anything in Kempo. So I'm not, for me, my students are going to learn Ed Parker curriculum exactly as taught, no extra jiu-jitsu, none. So I'm not going to do delayed sword, do a hand sword, take him to the ground, mount, and then do a choke. I feel like that's putting two things together that are separate. However, I do teach my students, for those that are interested in learning Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, I do teach them, okay, maybe I went to do delayed sword, I'm just making this up on the spot, and I did the kick to the groin, didn't hit them very hard, they shot for me, I'm on my back, now what? Okay, so now we're in a situation where, you know, as they shoved us back with the grab for delayed sword, I thought my hammer or the clear to the arm and the kick to the groin would end the fight, but I'm on my back. So now what do we do? And I feel like that is an area, for example, where Kempoists can learn a lot from Gracie Jiu-Jitsu or Jiu-Jitsu in general, because a lot of fights do go to the ground. Of course, I want to keep it stand up. Even the other go-to I find is the whole talk of multiple attackers. So I find that the strikers always have this one argument: multiple attackers, last place you want to be on the ground. I don't think any jiu-jitsu person would disagree with that. So I think that the perspective from someone who's a pure striker would go, jiu-jitsu people know what they're doing. They're going to take you to the ground. The other person is going to come in and kick you in the head, for sure. But I would argue, this is me, Paul, that Kempo would give you a greater advantage than jiu-jitsu for multiple attackers. Yes. But in the event there's multiple attackers and you have to fight and you get taken to the ground, I'm going to say this, who's more likely to get to their feet? Someone trained in jiu-jitsu or someone trained in Kempo? There, I would see 100 times out of 100 someone in jiu-jitsu, because they've been trained if someone takes you to the ground. That's just my honest opinion.
Well, I'll use this as as an analysis and thinking man. Mr. Parker is a thinking man,
Yeah.
which is the most important, which is what people say, the what if, formulation. Okay.
Yeah.
I look at techniques as base moves, not ideal phase. Ideal phase is I survive, you don't.
Yeah.
Okay. That's ideal phase. I win, you don't. Okay. I don't care about that, because when you're when you're in preschool in the first grade, you're handed workbooks on 1 + 1 is 2, 2 + 2 is 4. Those are just drills. So get your mind logically put together. When you say 2, is it 2 apples or is it an apple and an orange? It's 2 items, but it's not 2 apples. It's 2 items. So the point is that I look at the situation of, if I'm prepared, and Mr. Parker said this to me, I mean, for 12 years, I was in Pasadena in his office. I listened to him. Most of the lessons I got from Ed Parker were discussions like this, simplistic, sitting in the office, or if he were in his car, or if I was at somewhere we were eating, and he would ask, and he would love to ask what if questions all the time. And he really did. He was a genuine human being. And that way it would sort of stimulate what he was thinking, because the problem, one, is that if you're having a one-on-one conversation like I'm having with you, there's no feeling of intimidation or whatnot. But when you're sitting with the founding Grand Master and you're sitting there and you go, I want to say the right thing, or I won't say it. I can't tell you how many times I was at seminars and I would watch, being in the back of the room, which later I was pushed to the front of the room, he would ask questions of his black belts that were there, and they wouldn't have an answer. They didn't know what to say. And he would have to just drag it out of him. And there were conversations I'm not liberty to talk about, but I would hear him say things about, why don't they want to ask this? I am always repeating. They don't do their due diligence. So Parker always says, prepare for the worst, and then you know where it's going to be. So your choice is, do I stay? Do I run? Okay. Which is awareness, and the environment. And then you're looking at things like, who's there. And the first thing you would tell me is that, what is your exit strategy, Paul? It may be to the left, it might be right, but maybe it's right through the guy in front of you. So if you have multiple attackers and you think about that, it's sort of like when I'm driving down the street on my street, there may be maybe not one car on the street. I'm safe. Another car comes in, well, now something might happen. But what happens when I go to the freeway and there's hundreds, if not thousands of cars I have to negotiate? Okay. And as you know, when that screws up, bam, 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 you have a multi-car collision. That's not when you need the insurance. When you think, I need the insurance. I should have had insurance. Should have thought of that one. Should have not gone that way. So I share that with you so that you know it. I would bet that any one of the practitioners that you work out with, the teachers and such, are saying, it's not where I want to go, but if I'm down there, I'm going to make it quick and get out of it. Now, if it's a one-on-one, and I referred this or referenced it earlier, is that Trejo used to teach me that every time it ended with somebody, it was always a takedown, sweep, and body slam the son of a bitch in the ground, smash his face into the ground, break his nose, slam his head in to knock him out, or break an arm, he hits the ground, because generally the asphalt or the concrete is pretty hard and something's going to happen. All right. Then you got him in the position. If you then have to do what you know how to do, mount him, and then continue the ground and pound or submission, take him out. Great. The problem is that if we fall down there, how do I get out of it? And that's where I think it is important to speak to you and to teachers that you have to say, what are my options? How do I deal with a tire that blows out, not driving down the street, not with one car, but on the freeway, and I'm going 65 miles an hour, and I go, oh my God, I'm in trouble. Boom. How do I negotiate this so I don't get killed or kill others? And that's where I'm asking you, what is our plan? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, environmental awareness. I mean, I agree 100%, Paul, is so crucial. So, if someone has has brought a couple buddies with them, I don't want to take one person to the ground at all cost. I want to try to get away from the situation, not engage. If it's a one-on-one situation, it's not that you don't have to be environmentally aware. Of course you do. But you're also, if you're in a mounted position, there's many ways to quickly end a confrontation through, whatever it might be, a choke, an arm lock, whatever. When I'm in a side mount, whatever, Americana arm lock, there's ways I can end a fight quickly, and I'm still aware of what's happening on the ground. But a lot of the perception too, I think, is the idea that we want to take the person to the ground. And a lot of jujitsu is set up the other way. A bigger, stronger, heavier person takes us to the ground. And that is a lot different than, a leap from danger scenario where we do our leap, we come up, we roundhouse kick and do a spinning back kick. I mean, they physically took us to the ground, right? So we have ways that we can end a fight quickly. Now, we say position over submission. So the goal is not to submit the person, is to make sure they exhaust their energy. And then when they get tired, you might go for a choke or whatever. But again, it really depends on the experience level of the person that you're going against. But, certainly, if a female is taken to the ground and a male is on top and, he were to try to grab her collar or her hair or whatever it might be, there is countless ways she can immediately, we call it trap and roll, but or upa, we can bump the person over, maybe elbow to the groin and get back onto your feet and get away. But those moves, this is my opinion, are not taught in Kempo. And I've heard some people in Kempo, I have to say this, say, it's all in Kempo, you just need to know where to look. But then if you say that, and I ask 10 Kempo black belts, do you know what to do if you're on the ground? Do you feel the Kempo? Almost all of them say no. So I struggle with, it's all there. You just need to know where to look. I mean, it's not fair. Like, you're at an unfair advantage, Paul, because you've trained all your life at 78. So you have a whole different level of experience and knowledge. I'm not talking about the Paul Caseys of the world. I'm talking about first, second degree, even brown belt. Almost all say they don't have a clue what to do if they were in that position. So to me, it's not that I'm going, okay, Kempo needs more. I'm just bringing home some more stuff to understand my Kempo better and get better at Kempo. Some would say, no, what you're doing is you're taking away from your Kempo training. And I would go, no, I'm doing the opposite. I'm bringing it back to my Kempo to give me a different perspective of any of the base techniques. We'll call them base, not ideal. Any of the base techniques to go, here's what could happen if the technique isn't executed properly. So it gives me a whole, even locking horns is, it's usually taught for a choke and we ridge hand the groin. If that's a guillotine properly applied, you're going to go to sleep, right?
The factor that I took Mr. Parker's 8 considerations and knocked it down a little bit. Number one thing is the first lesson I ever learned from Frank Trejo was the mind and then the ring. If you're not right here, you don't get in the ring. So I teach the element of mind. This is very important. I revisit this a lot, and I will share this right now. I look at breaking down, unless you're sleeping, which is the zone, you're walking dead, you're out. Okay. I break it down in color. I use colors to designate. I said, when you're very happy, it's green, it's to the left. You're content, you're happy, you're jovial to the point of just ecstatic. You've been there. You know what I'm talking about? You can't stop laughing. It hurts so much. Those are positives. One positive, double positive, triple positive. In the middle, you're in the neutral zone, which means you're probably sleeping. And that's bad, because if you come out of that, you have to immediately assess the situation and go for it. Because when these things happen, it's not like I'm ready for you. I'm walking down the street. I know you're going to come. I got my gun, my knife, my stick, my Doberman, my buddies. We're ready to go to battle. Okay. Well, what the hell are we doing that for? I could have avoided all that and stayed in the house. You can't hurt me. Try to come in the house. That's a different deal. So we get into the fear, the negative side. And the first thing is concern. You're like, wait a second, something's not right. Okay. Now I usually say be in a yellow zone. So you're thinking concern. That deals with the environment. You have accepted something's going to happen. Now I'm wondering. So I got my mindset. Then you get into now the negative side of fear. And fear is either scared, anger, or rage. When you're scared, that's negative, and that would be a negative motion. What happens? People go to the movies. We love to be scared. Oh my God, the monster's coming to get me. I'm on the roller coaster. Oh my God, out of control. How many times you read with somebody go, hey, you're scaring me. This is scary. That's a little different. Okay, so pull it over. I don't like the way you're driving. Okay, that's a negative. Now, that is a negative. On the other end, rage is a negative, because that means you're emotionally controlled and it's out of control. You cannot assess. You're going to do stupid things. You're going to make a mistake. You're going to yell. You may say something you regret. That's bad. You may do something. We've seen that what happens a lot of times in domestic violence results in rage, because why? There's a relationship there. You're in control. That's what's happening. I want to control you. You want to control me. Our emotions get involved. Somebody dies. Shot, stab, whatever. The one negative positive that I like to teach is anger, controlled anger. When you're angry, what are you? You're assertive, you're defensive, you're in a protective mode. If you don't go to the other end of rage, you stay here, you void yourself of that emotion. You said, I'm pissed, and you know what? Now is battle time. And that's where I think you need to go to teach yourself that when you're going to get into an attack, you're seeing yourself that you instantly go to the anger, but not out of control. And you have to think about it. And you need to be willing to do whatever it is. It's not a sport. Oh, I'm just going to punch you in the face. Screw that. Kick him in the shin, break his knees. Okay. I stick it you're into his throat. Collapse that. He goes down. What do you care? Stick your finger in and rip out his eye. It can be done. I have yet to find anybody to train the eyeball from pokes. Now, I know what you're going to say. Well, this woman's on the ground. Then bite the son of a bitch, okay, and claw him with your ray, and then hurt him and keep on hurting him until the point that he becomes submissive, okay, because he has a psychological advantage, and that's what happens most of the time. If you're confronted, somebody's like, oh, I'm going to kick that little guy's ass, all right? And he doesn't know that he just grabbed the wrong tiger, okay? And that tiger swoops, rips him out, okay? But if you do go to the ground, the beauty of it is you're ready for that transition because you know how to do that, all right? So I am an advocate of learning ground warfare, but you got to have the understanding that when you're going to go and divide it into, is it a teaching situation? Yes, that's good. And spending quality time with you is excellent. And I really differ with you. I think you should teach them that the takedowns or what happens if you do go to the ground. Give that to them at a certain level. Don't take it wrong. I mean, a white belt, yellow belt, orange belt, you start to work them in it. You know, I would prefer that because that's probably what's going to happen. That's it. But you also have to tell them what we're doing on the mat is controlled. Mm-hmm. What we're doing in the street is not controlled. And that's where you got to go to. Now I'm going to hurt you or I'm going to walk away. And if you have to hurt him, then make it preemptive, direct, and effective. And Grandmaster Chuck Sullivan said, Paul, kick him in the groin and stick your fingers eye and choke the son of a bitch out and don't stop and then get out of there. And that's a 9-year-old man that can still do that to a lot of people if you spend any time with him. So help us to understand why it's important to do that, because you have that expertise now, 10 years of Gracie instruction. You understand how to do precisions, holds, mounts, submissions. You understand this stuff, and you can apply it immediately. It's going to go down. I understand why policemen would prefer to use that because they have to because of their jobs. Military, that's only last resort for them because they're in the kill. It's a kill. There's difference. They don't have to be accountable for that stuff. War is war. It's not pretty. Right now, we're facing in this country and in yours as well, a lot of very unsettling situations of what's happening when people don't get their way. And our governments are not enforcing it. They're making us submit to them. So I think it's important. Why don't you talk about that? I think because your expertise, that's your catch-all.
There's two things I would say. One is, again, we all start from the vertical, not the horizontal. Get that. But about the claw or the poke to the eye or a kick to the shin. If I take a scenario like this, I'm just going to make it up. If I take a situation where a couple's out and it's late at night and there's been a few drinks, and the guy wanders off and another guy comes in and makes the female feel uncomfortable. Maybe it's a party, or you're at a bar, or maybe you're at a company event. And all the female has been taught is to kick the groin, elbow the nose, poke the eye, pull the hair, and one of the person's coworkers is coming on very uncomfortably to the female. You know what, Paul? This is me speaking. I don't think she's going to do anything.
You're right. No, because you know why? She's in an environment that makes her submit to them.
That's right.
She's in a company situation. Inappropriate behavior always happens when people feel familiar with one another and they feel they can do that. There's where the step back and say, excuse me, I'm offended by it. Goodbye, and walk away.
Yeah.
Or leave. Now, if it's a company situation, chances that will work. But if you go into a bar, that's not a company. That's a place to meet, socialize, and a lot of times that's where adults try to fraternize to the point with the opposite sex, or sometimes same sex, whatever it is. I don't really care. But the point is that when I say kick to the shin, I mean shatter his shin because he's trying to kill you.
But here's where I feel, Paul, some of the I agree, the boundary, but the de-escalation techniques and the distance management, rather than someone grabs my wrist, I'm going to darting mace you. I'm just saying, I don't think the female will try that because she's in a situation where, this is where I'm saying, if all you've been taught is kick the shin, kick the groin, elbow the nose, poke the eye. Most, I would argue, and even not just, it's not a gender thing, smaller males will probably do nothing. So that, in my opinion, the distance management and the de-escalation techniques are advantageous. So there's a point when we want to, you're right, take the person out at all costs. But we have to decide when that point is. When is this threat now real? And I think that is much easier for people to ascertain with more experience. The less experience they have, their brain, a lot of things goes through and the fear kicks in and their arms get tight and their reflexes aren't as good. They have to make a decision, how serious is this threat? And this is where my point is that if all you've been taught is gouge the eye, chop the throat, I think a lot won't do that. And what happens is that unfortunately, that particular person can become a victim. That's my personal opinion. So here's where the bridging of the gap of maybe some of the de-escalation moves from jiu-jitsu and then the Kempo really go hand in hand. That's just my opinion. And one could argue, well, you can teach de-escalation techniques in Kempo. For sure you can. But again, there's a large focus on, taking the person out. And sometimes, I don't know, I'll make a technique up on the spot. Crossing talon. I love, one of my favorites. What happened? Well, he grabbed my wrist. So I broke his arm. I elbowed him in the jaw. I ripped his eyes. I elbowed his spine and kneed him in the head.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. Provide
Right?
one last jerk off. Okay.
Now, I know the counter argument is you don't have to go to all that extreme and finish it.
Why?
For
If
sure.
you're gonna do it. See,
Right.
I'm going to stop you. I'm going to interrupt you now.
Yeah.
Here's the difference. Okay. You teach somebody a technique, they get a false sense of they can do it. Same person goes down the street, says, I don't want to do the technique. I'm going to buy a gun. He buys a gun. He's got things. Then he's forced into the situation. The last guy goes and gets himself a dog. And then the dog runs away because the attacker throws a piece of meat and the dog runs off the guy to, oh my God, the gun jams. He didn't die, Michael Myers. And the last person all comes with this. The first thing you have to think about, this is the essential thing in teaching, that if you're going to engage, you're all the way through. And if you can't, then you leave. Parker said that to me. I was the first thing I said to you. He said, Paul, you don't always have to fight. Come back the next day and kick his ass because you can. If you're going to set up, he was thinking like pool. I'm going to place me in pool. I shot. Okay. I'm not going to give you that shot, but I'll let you think you can have the shot. And then the guy misses it, it sets it up, and Parker runs the table in pool. So it starts off, and that's why the first thing under Infinite Insights Volume 1 is that acceptance. Acceptance. Bad things are going to happen to you. That's why I walk in to train with you, sir. You're a high-ranking Kempo black belt, and you've also dabbled into ground effect fighting with jiu-jitsu. So you are even more well-rounded because you sort of address those issues. Cool. I feel confident because I'm learning from you. You're going to help instill in me the confidence I'm going to need, because if I'm placed in a confrontation, Jamie, whether I do jiu-jitsu, I do Kempo, or I'm a long-term runner and I can outrun you, okay? Bottom line is that I have to make that commitment to it and know that if I don't do that, all this other stuff is a waste of time. And you pointed out, is she going to do it? Well, she damn well better do it. Otherwise, she's going to end up another rape victim. And I can't think of more horrific crime than to violate a woman like that for the rest of her life. She will always, because that's a very intimate thing for a woman. Okay. So yet, I'm going to tell you right now, proper kick to the shin, shatter the bone, stomp that foot. There's 26 bones down there in the foot. Break them. Break them. The bastard's going to lay on the ground in pain while you run away. And I'm sorry to use words like that, but that all has to do with this, because in a confrontation, fine motor skills are gone. The big muscle is the only thing you can do to retain. So I think that's it. So I think in talking to you, I appreciate the importance of ground work. I really think that's more important than anything else. I think you need to address it. I think you need to spend some quality time with someone like you. I think you should embrace it, because at least you'll understand it. And then I think the other thing, this is my opinion, is that what do you do from the vertical, that if you have to go there, why don't you make it where he goes there so that he's body slammed and then you can do your choke out. Or if it's a confrontation with the law enforcement, you can't be beating these guys up. You got to do something else. You gotta use, you know, your
Yeah, I
arm.
mean, another thing too, Paul. Like you and I have trained for obviously a long time, and there's probably for both of us more times than we can count where maybe we were doing, I don't know, maybe we're full contact sparring, anything like that, and oh, your gas goes, and you get a little tired, and your arms feel tired. One of the things that I do appreciate, and I feel like it's helped my Kempo, is jujitsu. Gracie Jiu-Jitsu is about energy conservation. So if you think of Hoist Gracie again in the original UFC, and I know a lot of people say that is sport. It's a lot more sport today. In the original, as you know, there was no time limit and no weight class. So if you were 250 pounds, you fought a 178-pound Hoist, and that was really pitted style versus style. And Hoist's approach was green light, red light, green light. Stay away. When you throw the haymaker or the big kick, I'm going to clinch you. I'm going to take you to the ground. I'm going to keep you on the ground, get you tired, let you throw those rabbit punches, which won't usually end the fight, and then I'm going to arm bar you or choke you, right? So that was really, to me, that helped me understand as I get older too, Paul, and I'm fighting one of my, I don't know, 30-year-old top black belts as fit as can be. Okay, I just ate pasta for dinner. So now I got to think about conservation of energy and picking my shots better than when I was 30. And I said, okay, let's make this a slugfest, right? So I feel that energy conservation from the stand-up perspective helps a lot. And the other thing too, that is a total misconception, I really want to say this, is that the perception is that BJJ is ground. Half truth. It is mostly ground for sure. But this, I'm just going to say this. I have learned in the 10 years I've been, 10.5 years I've been doing it, just as many stand-up techniques as in Kempo. There's tons for club, knife, gun, choke, hair grab, lapel grab.
Has it evolved? Has it grown that way into that?
No.
Or has it always been there?
No, so Elio Gracie had a very specific self-defense system that basically deals with all types of grabs from wrist to collar to double collar to bear hug from behind. And I noticed that you and Todd mentioned this, and it is true. Squatting sacrifice is right in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, same technique, so it's really, really cool. But that self-defense unit is the core of everything. So it's like, you know, in BJJ, there can be a sportive element, and there can be a sportive element in Gracie as well. But the primary focus is street self-defense, which to me, that's the only thing I care about. I don't care about sport. I really don't. Like I
agree with you. I to do that right now because, you know, I got joints and things that are hurt that never hurt before. I agree with you. I think the key element though is get in and get out. And if you're in a situation, like I said, you drive down the street, nobody's there. You get in, there's 1 or 2 cars. Then you're on the freeway and there's thousands of cars. You need to know how to negotiate in the event that something happens and you find yourself on the ground. What is the way to get out of that? And if you don't do that, you're gonna have a problem. But that would not be my first choice, to go to the ground.
For sure.
That's it. I think that we're on the same page with that. Everybody puts a lot of focus on Ed Parker's Kempo as a striking system all the time. Really, we're primarily a jiu-jitsu system. If you break down the techniques, I mean, sure, we have a lot of techniques, but what do we do for a left-right combination or a left combination, a right, or a kick or whatever? There's certain things, but a lot of it is grappling. It is there. That's what Parker has it. Under 154 techniques, primarily it's there. But the key element is, again, observing, making an evaluation, understanding where you're at with this person. And like you said, get out of range. Because once you're in range, if you're in range, he's in range. Okay, you know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah,
and
exactly.
And then we're closing that gap, and things start to get funky. And if I get into contact manipulation, I'm presuming that you know nothing there, and that's my big mistake. But you won't be thinking about grabbing me if I broke your kneecap. You'll be thinking of something else. Then I can finish this matter and run. You know, like I said, Parker told me a lot of things about this, and I understand it. I've never ignored what's on the ground, and I think that's really important. I just have a problem I've watched recently some a system that incorporates Kempo and groundwork, and I thought the transitions were really poor. I didn't like, it looked like 5 swords, and then the guy was a pole dancer to go down. And they were very, it was like 3/4 speed, and then half speed when they did the ground because fearing of injury. Okay, and
yeah, exactly. And just like you, I'm in the exact way. I don't try to bridge and take, I don't know, deflecting hammer and then go into an armbar on the ground. I don't do that. They're separate. I teach the Kempo system exact as written from delayed sword right to the end, but I also teach separately what to do. And the other thing too is, if from a realistic perspective, is even if you're full contact sparring, all that goes by various definitions, the whole idea of punching and kicking each other, and then you get skin tight and the ref jumps in and says break. There's no break on the street, right? But there is in a tournament. You say, well, it's full contact sparring, kind of, but on the street, I mean, they can take you to the ground if they're skin tight. So I feel like that's an element that's really missing. You know what I'm
well,
saying?
in the sport aspect, recently I've been at a lot of tournaments of late, and there's one called continuous sparring. And but there are no ground attacks. You're not allowed to, nor they're allowing them sweep. So the element of sport versus reality, I would rather train in the school with the proper supervision and the mat under your, say, somebody like yourself, and we're engaging, and I will do the sleeper, and I'll take him down and then stay on top of him and then drive and do. There's a good example of it. Frank loved that. There's a really good video from about 88, maybe 87, 88. I was at the internationals and Trejo was featured, and he was attacked by, I think, half a dozen. There was 2, 4, 6, 8 people, and he did multiple. And every attack, this is Frank Trejo's signature. The period at the end was always a takedown, and you are on the ground. That was it.
Yeah.
He instilled that in my head to this day. If I'm here with you, I'll jack you up with a heel palm to the shoulder and spin you around, drop you, choke you out, throw you down, and hit a hammer fist. Not this. I'll hit the hammer fist, boom, on you 3 or 4 times. Promise you, you're not getting up. Okay. Now, sadly, I think a lot of people, because they don't work at it as well. When I was coming up, Ron Chappelle was always teaching me, do the sweep, takedown, point. And they got rid of sweeps because I think either people didn't know how to do it right, or people were getting injured. And I think it's very flamboyant, sweep the shit out of somebody. I'm saying, whoop, boom. It's like, and I know you can take somebody down real well. You know how to throw somebody. However, there are people that teach that and are not very good at it and have injured themselves or others. And, I will leave it with this idea. Parker said to me once, we were there, he goes, Paul, just because you know it doesn't mean you have to show them it. They don't need to see everything, and that's true, because if you do it incorrectly, it can reflect on you negatively. And he actually modified. He was down in Brazil where he did something with Frank, and he slipped in his boots. He was wearing his suit and his boots. He slipped, and but he sat on Frank and still did like squatting sacrifice. It was like a foam on him, and then he did like dance of death. It was like whatever it was. But see, that's the beauty of Kempo. Kempo allows you to say, if it goes this way, like flowing. And I know that the reference a lot of people like to use in JKD is water. Be water, my friend. Be a gas, be a liquid, be solid. Actually, what's more important than water is oxygen. 2 parts oxygen. Okay. It's H, and then you have 2 O. Okay. You have the oxygen. Oxygen is there all the time. I can survive without water for a period of time. If you have no oxygen, it's over with. And you know that because you can choke somebody out, and that's what you probably will do. You get them in a submission, get them in there and cut that off.
And that's where, Paul, I feel that again, I'm just trying to bring more home to Kempo. Here's where one thing that we may or may not, I don't know, agree on is that I don't think there's a lot of chokes in Kempo. I don't, only because I have learned, I'm not kidding, dozens and dozens and dozens of different ways and when I don't teach many kids, I teach mostly advanced adults, but when I take some of the kids that I teach and I say, here's how to do a rear naked choke, Paul, I'm going unconscious. Like and that they go, whoa, really? Because it's not based on, grabbing, using your forearm and how someone typical was not trained would do. Or if someone puts me in, if someone puts me in an armbar, like I'll roll with my daughter, Morgan and Madison. And, I might give them my arm intentionally. Next thing you know, they have me in armbar. They don't know because they're not trained enough in jiu-jitsu. Geez, a little bit more, you're going to break dad's arm. Like and that is really nice for their confidence to go, wow, I didn't have to be bigger and stronger than dad. I just used leverage, elevated the pelvis, pushed the elbow back. It's gone. Like, so I feel like some of those elements can improve our Kempo by going, hey, maybe if we're doing crossing talon or any other technique, we can use this less based on strength and more based on leverage. And I just feel like nothing changes. The Kempo system remains intact, but I just try to bring that home. And you know what? At the end of the day, Paul, I just love martial arts, so I like to keep an open mind. And keep
enthusiastic. I think you and Todd Durgan would have a nice conversation. Remember, when we do things like lone kimono or snapping twig, those are, they are a form of a bar. Okay, or snap, but it depends on what's happening. By the way, Dr. Chappelle talks about, the attempt of attack, like an attempted grab, an attempted. I got to be honest with you, I don't think there's any such thing as that. I think they're going to do it. They're going to try to do it. If you can counter that before it happens, in other words, we're driving down the freeway and we're using our experience as educated drivers with our children in the back. And we see red lights way up ahead and we go, uh-oh, somebody's stopping. And then it's like chain domino. Boom, 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 boom. Well, if you don't anticipate that because you're too busy looking at the cell phone or talking to your passenger, and all of a sudden, oh my God, you're traveling at a very fast rate of speed. Okay, a certain rate of speed, not fast. That's the distinction of it. But the point is that your reaction time. So did you anticipate that? And I think that's it. So I would like to see the evolution of ground effects, what you do on the ground and responses should be part of the curriculum. It's just instead of we have a thing called extensions. Okay.
Sure.
Right. Frank taught me, when I learned the original 154, it was under the 32 technique system. Okay. 32 techniques per belt. Yeah. Most of those extensions were in there. Later on, they just broke it down and they just took the first half of it. And then you got the second half. Trejo's approach on it was, listen, and Parker said the same thing. Will you do 5 swords? I don't know. We'll just have to see what would happen. Probably not. But the concept of jab, cross, and hook are boxing concepts. Okay, that's true. Now the weapon being used, is it a hammer fist? Is it an open sword? Is it a claw? Is it a punch? It depends on you. But the point is that you need to adapt to what is going to happen and flow with it. That's why the oxygen, which surrounds us, if you go like this, the oxygen is being moved. Yeah. It's still encompassing my hand. It's never stopped being in contact with me. I'm just moving around in it. Okay. Whereas if you stick your hand in the water really never, it makes room for you, but it still surrounds you. But I can remove myself from that. The option is here. You adapt, you understand. I think it's important, but we need to learn the transitions from vertical to horizontal, and from there back to vertical. And to come up for vertical means in military, you have the high point, you have the advantage because you're down on your opponent. That's why they always try to get the high, the perimeter around looking down, and he'll say shooting into the barrel of fish. They have no chance. And here's the thing. So how to go from green to red to green, so to speak. Okay.
Yeah, and one of the things I do for that exact scenario for fun is I'll have one person on their back and I'll say, okay, it's the first move that we learn in what we call the Gracie combatives, trap and roll. We have a standard variation, a punch block variation, and a headlock variation. Bad guy, bad woman, you can do either one. You can try to punch them in the face, you can put them in a headlock, or you can choke their throat with either hand or single hand or both. And as soon as that person gets on top, bump them over and get back on your feet. So they're getting that constant repetition, like Repson, of, okay, and by the way, the choke could have been a collar grab, it could have been a hair grab. It's all similar to Kempo, lone kimono, clutching feathers, different height zone, but we get the idea. But they're learning immediately, bad person, heavier person jumps on, bump them off, get back to your feet. So I just feel like it gives you a different maybe understanding for that horizontal position, that it will make your vertical position better.
I applaud you on that. I think that's a great understanding. It's very simplistic, it's direct, and it gives you a chance to assess it from standing, where you can leave, you can run away, you can tell people. By the way, there's other the use of weapons is one of the facets that is not addressed as much as it should be. Headbutts are good, back and forward, and biting. I hate to say it. Shoulder strikes with the hit with the shoulder. Disrupt, remember the three concepts: height, width, and depth. Well, I also think there's other things like that we forget to say is time and distance. I use that a lot. And also obscurity, because what's behind you might be the best decision for you to get out. Okay. But people fail to see that. They get tunnel vision on whatnot. So again, Jamie, I think you've really we only scratched the surface, but I think you hit some really important points. And the point is that you are not avoiding or dismissing Kempo. That's your to go. But if
I love it more now.
But here's the thing: you do understand what happens to go down here. This is the problem. You have great knowledge. Well, I'm saying you have much more knowledge than most of us on the ground. You have this knowledge here on the up here. The big thing I worry about is how do we do the transitions to make them work? And that's the thing. So I think incorporating takedowns and chokes and levers and holds and whatnot are essential, because once you're in that position, you can manipulate somebody. You can take them and hurt them. Now, the question is how bad do you want to hurt them? Well, if you're really going to engage, sorry, I'm not going to get hurt. You are. Because I can't afford to get hurt, Jamie. I got a 7.
What about Paul, a child in a school where they're told anti-bullying, but you know where I'm going with this? That the striker, call them what you want, the karate person, the kung fu person, the taekwondo, they're on top, but they don't know how to control the person. So what happens is that person ends up going and getting in trouble for giving Johnny a bloody nose, when a simple choke that wouldn't have put the person unconscious. Have you had enough? You had enough? We can negotiate until you're had enough and it's over. To me, that kid that did nothing wrong ended the fight in a much more humane way, where the other person didn't go home, but was probably humiliated more because they basically cried uncle. That's just a nice way to be able to finish the fight without having to feed 8 elbows to the other kid's nose and say, hey, we're anti-bullying. I did what I had to do to defend myself. I just think it gives more options.
One of the things I think would be is that submission techniques, locks, joint locks, manipulations. Wally was great. The small circles, big circles. I'm gonna tell you right now, you grab your fingers and I guarantee you're going with somebody. You split that up. I've watched that. It works. I've taught Georgie that. I have been in a situation where I was in elementary school where I punched a guy and he was a bleeder. And he was like I hit him with a 2x4. Okay. Bleeding all over. And, the point is that we're going to get into those squabbles. The only thing I fear is anything with chokes around the neck and whatnot. That can be, it doesn't take much oxygen loss to cause brain damage. And we need to understand that. So I would prefer, with children, understanding more submissive type of things However, if they're going to be taught what to do against an adult, they need to understand some things like, what are your safe words?
Yeah.
If you don't know the word, I leave, daddy, mommy told me a safe word. You're not that person. See you later, you know? And that's about, you know, that, but those are special categories. Women and children are the most vulnerable, and also elderly, to predators. And right now, predators are feeling very confident in what they can do and what they can get away, because they don't fear cops anymore. They don't fear prosecution.
You're right.
I don't understand this. This is, to me, when I was growing up, this would never have ever been considered. And so those people that are in charge need to be removed. And we need, again, the respect for one another. That's why somebody comes into your school to learn from you, to be a better human being. Because most of it, our journey is mostly, we really don't get into altercations. It's very seldom, you know. But the beauty of what we have there is the passing on is our lineage, the history where it comes from, and the fact that we can share this in this modern day technology. This is great. You're in Canada. I'm over on the other side of the country in Nevada, and we can share this. And the beauty of it is that we're allowed to speak and share these ideas and differentiate and maybe enlighten one another or understand. Number one thing is we protect ourselves or protect our family. We know what is right. And when that's the most essential thing. And honestly, I'm happy you could be on here today. And
Thank you so much, Paul.
Oh, anytime.
Like I said before, I know you always try to make it about your guests, but what you do for the Kempo community and martial arts and in general is just unbelievable, outstanding. Thank you so much for everything you do. You really inspire me.
Thank you, Jamie. I think you're an amazing man. I love the photos of you on a vacation with your wife. I can see the color in your skin compared to
I know. I wish I was still there.
Anyway, you have a beautiful day. We'll pump this out. And again, folks, if you're over in Canada, Jamie, tell them real quickly where you're at so that people can reach out to you.
Yeah, I'm in London, Ontario, Canada. It's basically right in the middle between Toronto, Ontario, and Detroit, Michigan. We're right in the middle, and you can find me on Facebook, Seabrook Martial Arts Academy, or YouTube.
Wonderful. Again, on behalf of the Kempo Karate Hall of Fame, my name is Paul Casey. I'm very thankful for our special guest today, Jamie Seabrook, and we'll see you again in the near future. With no further ado, sir, salute.
Salute. Thank you so much.